Welcome to the neighborhood. Thanks for joining us in a Catholic conversation on marriage and family.
That's right.
We'll
be conversing about conversations.
Yes, we're going to be. That's the topic of today's conversation is conversations. But because our words matter. But right now, if you're listening
Especially
to this,
our words matter, but everybody's words matter.
True. And I still haven't been able to knock this little cold. It's still there. I'm still.
Well, you don't sound too bad. Yeah. We've had so much sickness in our house. I mean, that's like everyone who has children this time of year, I feel like.
It is. 'Tis the season.
It's just, it's a mess. But that's okay.
But spring is coming. And
I know.
There's some flowers that are beginning just to break through.
I'm like dying to get
bit.
into my garden and just
like not just
out,
yet though, right? A little bit maybe.
We're almost there, yeah.
But if you're listening to this as it's released, Easter is still ahead. We're in Holy Week.
Yes.
And those who've been joining us on the Cana 90 journey, you've seen this. We have been preparing you for having a great Lent so that you can have an amazing Easter.
Okay, and if you are listening to this and you have not signed up for Cana 90, sign up this week.
Well, it's worth it even just for the Triduum.
That's what I was just going to
say. Go ahead.
That's what I'm saying. Sign up this week because the resources that we have for Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and Holy Saturday, as well as Easter Sunday, all of them are so great. And
sign up for that, and you can remove yourself right after if they don't want more emails. But it's worth it.
Absolutely. So those of you who have the Cana 90 book, flip to that section so you can be ready. So you can gather what you need to really. I was thinking about Holy Week and the Triduum, and I just it has become throughout our family life such a very important time of year for us. For the celebration of our family. I really rivaling Christmas, I think, because there's a whole other feel. There's a whole other otherworldly feel.
We love Christmas and it's beautiful.
Yeah, but I feel like Easter just it is the Paschal mystery. It is everything that our faith is based upon.
Yeah.
That is just become more and more important to me that we really double down on the traditions that we have, because I just think it communicates so powerfully to kids.
And if you're listening to this after Easter has actually already come, we're probably still in the Easter season. And
then we're like, too late.
No, because there are tons of things to continue with, right? So you just want to encourage you to be a part of these traditions, and in March's newsletter, for those who are on the newsletter, I talked about the power of being part of a bigger story.
Yeah.
And I talked about my Irish heritage, and March is the month of celebrating some Irish heritage in light of St. Patrick's Day. But it is so important that our kids get that they are part of a bigger story.
Yes.
And that we remind ourselves that we're part of a bigger story. And there is a spiritual ancestry and legacy that has been gifted to us.
Yeah.
And really this season is so powerful in forming our kids and really allowing that to shape us as well.
So before we jump into our conversation, I do want to tell you all something that I am so very excited about. So I'm in the midst right now of our mother-daughter course, Women Wonderfully Made. And I know there are people listening who have taken the course with us already. We are doing a mother-daughter retreat here in Steubenville. And it is very limited spots. We literally have 30 like mother-daughter pairs that we can do. So 30 mothers, 30 daughters. And we just opened it up. It was in our newsletter. The link is in our newsletter. You can go to our website and do it. It is going to be at this Christian camp that's near us, and it has horseback riding, barn dances. There is archery. We'll have crafts. And if you've taken the course more than a year ago and you have not seen our new mother-daughter book, oh my gosh, I'm going to hold it up here. This is the new workbook that we have, the book that we have for moms. And, oh, no, that's not the mother's book. That's the daughter's book. Anyway, then we have a workbook for daughters. So you get 2 books. Come and redo it. We're going to review that information. We are going to have a fun, amazing time at this Faith Ranch is where we're doing it here in Steubenville.
Horse camp, it's beautiful.
One of my favorite, our kids, we've had a relationship with Faith Ranch probably for the past 20 years. And I just love this place and I am so excited. So you have just go on the website, sign up. immediately because
so if people have done the course before, it's worth coming. If you've done the course,
it's 100% worth coming.
And if you've never done the course, you'll actually have a time where you are going to help walk mothers and daughters through preparing for the changes, the adolescence that's coming. And this is not the sex talk. This is not anything.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yes. This is not the sex talk. We are not talking about that. We are talking about
how women are wonderfully made.
Women wonderfully made. And being a woman and the changes that come with being a woman. We're going to talk about style, personalities. We're talking about emotions. We talk about prayer. But really, my overall goal is to solidify that relationship between moms and their daughters. So that is the most important.
What ages are we talking about, daughters?
I would say 10 and up.
Not the mothers. I don't care about what age for the mothers.
Moms, you can come no matter how old you are.
All right. So
I would say between 10 and 14 would be perfect.
Okay.
So whether they've started their cycle or not, I think that between 10 to 14-year-olds.
Limited sign up now. You're wrapping up the course that you're doing online. Right. Most of our stuff is done online because we want to make it accessible to more people. But there are unique occasions like this. And we're not going to do this a lot. Yeah, we may or may not continue offering this just because it does take some time, energy, resources to pull off.
But I am really excited to do this because all of the moms and daughters that I've done this course with, I feel like they know me. I feel like I know them. You know, I would love it. I would just love it so much if you came. So
and a teaser, we will be announcing our Catholic couples getaway in the very, very near future, within the next month. So if you want to,
we'll be announcing too.
Well, yes. Shh. But we will be announcing that sometime in the next month. And if you are interested, CatholicCouplesGetaway.com is the website. There's a wait list there to be the first to know if you want to stay in the know. All right. All right. So our topic today is our conversation is about conversations, right?
That's right.
You know, there's a story about a story. No.
So why are we talking about conversations, Mike? Why is this so important?
So first, let's start with one. We all think that conversations are important. However, there was just 3 years ago. Does that sound right?
2019.
So I was in this conversation with Curtis Martin, founder of Focus, and we're just about marriage and family stuff and the work we're doing in our ministry. And he says, "Oh, have you read this study on Catholic parenting?" And I said, "What study?" And or I should say, which study?
It was American Religious Catholic Parenting.
Right. And
so it was very specific.
Yeah. And so as we talked, he says, if you don't get a chance to read the whole document, the most salient point that I took away from that study was the power of conversations between parents and their kids about passing on the faith, that was the most influential aspect of how parents pass on the faith to their kids.
I thought, and I remember reading that, hearing that, and you and I talking about that, and I was surprised and not surprised. I guess kind of like something intuitive, like if you think about it, you're like, that makes sense. But I think what surprised me was how important.
Yeah, because I think that it forced us to look back, just reflect on our own lives. Because I think a lot of times when we hear a study, or does that comport with my experience? Does that resonate with who I am or what I've had? And
studies
what the
confirm with common sense suggests, or they're wrong. And this kind of confirmed what common sense suggests. You're that makes sense.
But I didn't. I don't know if I would have articulated it that way on the outset. I would have said they were important.
Exactly.
But the power of them was really revealed in the study. And then when we looked at our own lives, when we look back, we've got 20, 28, 29-year-olds down to, 11-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
And just seeing, particularly in our adult children, what has really helped shape them and help form them as mature, faithful adults. What not just passing on the faith, but just that they're good human beings. They're virtuous, they're talented, they know who they are, they know what their place is in this world. And I would have to say the conversations we've had with them over the years.
Yeah.
And it's a two-way. Conversation isn't a pure one-way like us dumping, right? Conversation is this two-way dynamic that I would say is one of, if not in the top 3 most influential parts of that formation. So that's why we want to spend some time talking about it.
I even remember as a child, my mother taking time to have conversations with me, very intentional conversations, like time when she would like take me out like for popcorn and a soda or whatever, and she would get a beer, or, just take me out for coffee or whatever, just to have those intentional times that we could just talk to each other, and that wasn't like this big thing that she had to tell me. And so that's why it was like an ongoing thing that she did with me that I have also tried to do, with my daughters.
And I think for all of us, if we just pause for just a quick second and think about, where have we made some pivots in our lives, made some changes that were for the better, or, really began looking at life differently. They often were preceded by some instrumental conversation. That there is something that I think we intuitively all know. There's something powerful about a conversation that changes us and changes the people involved.
Well, the thing is that one of the reasons to have these conversations with children is because parents, the relationship between parent and child, it is the most socially important relationship that child has 100%. Is with the parent. And I don't think that I don't think that we as parents think about it in that way. We don't consider ourselves the most important social relationship that your child has. But that's really true, no matter whether they are 2 years old or 10 years old or 18 years old. Yeah. I mean, while they are under your roof, especially, and then you become less and less important, as you should, because you need to launch them.
We must decrease so that they can increase.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And also, too, a lot of this, there is something powerful about, again, we didn't just say teaching your child, although part of our role as parents is to teach our child. We didn't say just merely discipline your child, which again is part of it. There are all these elements in a way that come through. But oftentimes the primary vehicle we're having for a lot of this teaching and a lot of this discipline and a lot of this formation and a lot comes in the form of conversation. So we have to recognize that when we have conversations, why do we have conversations? The reasons why we have conversations. I mean, some of it is to pass on knowledge,
to form the child.
Right. To form the child and then pass on information.
Just stuff about the world, how grass grows and how the seasons change.
And it's
blah,
passing
blah,
on
blah,
our
like
worldview, passing on a worldview. And
yes.
and all of this is oriented towards helping them shape their own view, right?
Right.
But conversations also, in a very real way, pass on a sense of identity.
It says to the child, this is how you can expect to be treated by other people. Like it says how you talk to your child, you're like the baseline,
Yes,
and you're creating that baseline. And so your child is going to learn, this is how I can expect to be treated by other people. So that's why we have to be so careful of that.
And that really comes down to much more than simply the words, which is why we want to get into this. It's not just tell me, somebody's sitting there ready with a notepad saying, okay, what are the words I need to say?
Right.
And I remember there was a dad's course I was teaching one time. And I remember the dad said to me, he's like, all right, Mike, you talk about having these conversations with my son. What am I going to say? And he was waiting for me to say, okay, you say these specific words. And we actually did talk through a little bit of a script for him because I think we kind of need that in the beginning. But ultimately, it's much more than just following a script. Right. Again, conversation is deeper than just the words we communicate.
This is the second reason, though, to have the conversation is about the child. And we're going to start, though, when starting this whole topic, we have to start, and this is part of our philosophy, is that being intentional about how you speak to your child helps form you.
This is it.
That's why we want you to have these conversations with your kids. Yes, for them. Yes, everything that we just said, we stand by that, of course. But at the same time, we have to recognize that these conversations, being intentional about that, it helps form us as parents. And you know what? And I'm sure that there's parents sitting out there, especially dads, who may not be as verbally adept as their wives, or whatever, think, I don't know how to talk to my 3-year-old, my 10-year-old, my 13-year-old. I don't know how to do this. If you feel inadequate, I'm going to tell you right now, good.
That's where you need to be.
Good. I'm so glad you feel inadequate. You know what? If you feel inadequate, then that means that you realize you have to grow.
Yeah.
I feel like if you do something for the first time, and you're like, oh, I got this, then you're really not open to learning. You can't teach that person. And now, of course, after doing it a couple times, you should be like, okay, I got this. But at the beginning of the process, I think that there's a very healthy, a healthy self-knowledge of like, to know what you don't know.
Well, and just to that point, there are some people who conversations, and it may not just be a male-female thing, there are people who are...
Yes, because you're very good at conversations.
Intuitively or naturally good at conversations.
Yeah, conversationalists.
And conversationalist, talkative, verbal processing, whatever you want to call it, right? But let's also recognize that even for those people, but especially for those who it's not naturally a gifting, it is a skill. And much of parenting, you know, we really believe there is something in the heart of every human being that calls them out of themselves, and that they have some intuitions. They have some motherly intuitions and fatherly intuitions.
Sure,
right?
yeah,
and
absolutely.
we're not saying that isn't vital and important. However, a lot of what we talk about is skills, right? We want to grow as a parent. Well, there are certain skills that we need to learn. And the beauty of this is as we unpack this, you'll see that, and again, some of you are already doing this. Some of you are already well on your way, but some of you maybe hit a new plane or new phase and you're like feeling a little uncertain again, right?
Right. Well, that's how we felt.
Right.
You know?
And so just to kind of, again, draw that correlation of God created parenting, being a mom, being a dad, so that in the way that your desire to form your child, to be a great parent, to really serve them, is also the way God's going to use to help form and shape and change you. Meaning, when your child needs you, crying in the middle of the night, you are drawn to go and take care of that child. You know, there may be times where you've chosen a different sleep pattern and you're trying to get them to cry out for a little bit or whatever. But ultimately, your heart is drawn to helping care for them. Well, now at each stage, when we talk about conversations you're going to be called into, it's going to challenge you in a new way, call you out of yourself. But the beauty of it is, in general, we're not given kids when they're teenagers. We're given them when they're young. And when they're young, we can learn at that stage. Right. And that's teaching and forming us, which then lays the foundation for the next level and the next level. And we grow with that.
All of these things are foundational.
And they build one upon the other, so you don't have to jump in the deep end you know, completely without any life jackets and no skill, no knowledge, whatever. And but that's the challenge, right? We're being called to something.
It's the great thing about being a parent is that this is a path of formation, and that if you feel like, you know, you're doing great at it, but seriously, if you feel like you're doing great at it, then maybe you are. Maybe you've been doing this for a long time. But if you're looking at, if you're like, I don't even know where to start. Well, that's what we want to talk about.
We're going to walk through kind of different ages of kids and ways that you might approach the conversation with them, right?
All right. So let's start with toddlers and preschoolers.
Woohoo!
Okay. Oh my gosh. I love that. We both love toddlers and preschoolers.
They are fun,
so
right?
They're so fun.
I just dropped off a lunch for a kid who forgot their...
will remain nameless.
Yeah. Who forgot their lunch at home. So I had to bring it in, drop it off at the office. And the secretary there was like, "Oh, Mike, I just love your kids. I love the young ones, and I love the older ones too. Even they're fine, you know." And because we have in school right now, we have a senior in high school and down to I guess sixth grade, right?
Yeah.
And so 6th through 12th, right? Grade. And I'm like, "Oh," and I said, "If you think they're great, wait till you see our grandkids. They're at the elementary school." And I said, I said, "Wait till they come up." And she says, "I hope I'm not here when they come." But there is something awesome, and I know sometimes frustrating, but there's something awesome about toddlers. What did Dobson say? "Give me an army of toddlers, and I'll conquer the world."
Yes.
There's a power and a dynamism and an energy. And we were also, sorry, just another thing, as we were traveling and visiting friends there, she's not a toddler, but I can picture
she's like 11.
Yeah, she's like 11 years old, but the things that she said were
when she was a toddler, though, she was
already
very precocious and very precocious.
And it was the things that came out of her mouth. I'm like, who are you?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So maybe you have a kid like that. They're saying things like, where did that come from?
Yes.
And I think that as parents, you see some things early. Every kid is different. And the wonder of conversations that you'll see that is sprinkled throughout all the ages is that you'll see their uniqueness. You'll see their personality. And how do you not treat the kids as if they're one of the herd? They're just a pack, right? Is conversations. And yes, there are group conversations, but these one-on-one conversations give you that opportunity to delve into the uniqueness, the wonder, the beauty of each individual child. And again, there are conversations that we can have as a whole group, and we'll talk a little bit about that maybe, but thinking about your toddler, even seeing from the early days, how are they? Who are they? What's there? What's the natural stuff, the fingerprint
their natural
of God
personality? I mean, you can
them.
pick up temperaments and personality really when they're infants.
And so how do we speak?
We have a couple. So we have a couple like little tips and tricks, and then at the end of every stage, we'll give you some things to talk about, like basically like conversation starters with the child at that age. So first, I would say, our advice would be to speak to toddlers and preschoolers with elevated language. Speak to them kind of like that you would speak to an adult, or you would speak to someone who totally understands what you say. Because even though, like right now, the toddlers in our lives, they will talk back to us, like they will say, you know, and like they you can't understand the words they are saying.
But they're clearly communicating.
But they are clearly communicating, and they have that inflection. Anyone who's talked to a little kid recognizes this. And so why are they doing that? Because they are imitating you. Yeah. They are imitating what they hear, like the inflections, the different ways of saying things, like different even vowels. And this is how dialects and accents are passed on, because they imitate that. Yeah. And so if you speak to them and you use just not even like complicated words, just use regular words. If you talk to them, then that's the way that they are going to talk. Like if you ever talk to a little kid who'll be like what we always laugh, my sister Anna, when she was little, she was like 3 years old, and you would say, "Oh, Anna, what do you want to eat?" And she was like, "Well, actually, I would like to do blah, blah, blah." And it was so funny because she would like barely talking and she would use like something like actually, or like, you know, or using like, well, the consequence of that would be, and it's like, how do these kids learn these words? Because that's the way their parents speak to them. Right. And we've all met kids who, like, a lot of times people say this about homeschoolers, that homeschoolers, like, they talk like little adults. Right. Why? Because they're with their parents all day long. And I think there's something so vital about this, again, that holds true in every age group, meaning by your conversation, you're elevating them. Exactly.
You're drawing them up, not making. But I'll have a nuance to this, right? We don't want to talk down to our kids, but we do want to make it age appropriate. Mm-hmm. Meaning, and I'll revert to babies for just a quick second, because the conversations aren't very meaningful at that. But you're still communicating. Right. Yeah. And
they need to be spoken to.
They need to be spoken to. And I think there's something beautiful about just talking to a baby. Like I remember holding our kids and talking to them. Yeah. And I remember singing to them. And but there are also times where they are mimicking us, and sometimes I mimic them.
That's true. That is always fun to do.
Because so a baby makes a cooing noise, and I return that coo, and then I try to change it and see if they follow. And there is this dance in a way that we have that we never want to leave any of our kids in a conversation down in the low, below their age, but we also want to speak to where they're at, because our communication, particularly with the younger kids, isn't purely the words we say, although they are important. It is also how we communicate in our body language, the demeanor, the emotion, the affective, the affect that is communicated. So with a baby, your peace, your presence, your joy, your positivity, all of that matters and communicates. So even if they don't understand the words you're saying as a baby, it's communicating that there is a value you place on me.
Right.
There is an importance in this this exchange that's going on here. So then translate that higher in the toddlers. You want to, in general, start raising them up to have a higher language. But there are times where they'll say something nonsensical and I'll be like, oh, so bobbity boobity bop, 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 and they'll just laugh because they know what I'm saying doesn't make sense.
Right.
And
exactly.
They're even
they
if
can
they don't
recognize gibberish, even if they can't say it, because most people, when you learn a language, you can understand a language first.
That's right.
And then you speak it.
And
it's true for children.
And there's something powerful too, which I just pray our two son-in-laws will finally break through with our grandchildren. But like speaking a second language, they always talk about how absorbent the early child is. And this is probably toddler into pre or elementary age, right? Where they are like a sponge, soaking up that second language. So let's make sure, if you only speak one language, that you're doing it well for your kids.
Like, for example, if a child says, more wawa, don't say back to your child, oh, do you want wawa? The only reason they're saying wawa is because they don't know how to say water. And so I would always respond and say, oh, would you like a glass of water?
Right.
And they would, yes or whatever. Or you can, as they're learning to speak, even have them repeat after you. But don't talk baby talk to kids. Just talk like a normal person.
And again, this is true in any age group, but what you're communicating in that is that, and I already kind of said this, but like you're giving them your time. So many times we're busy as parents. That doesn't mean you have to drop your life when your kid is starting a conversation, or that they're asking for the umpteenth time they can have this, they're that when we're trying to put them to bed. But in general, what we're communicating by having a conversation, even with a toddler, is that I'm giving you my most valuable possession, my time.
So we have this video that we have to share, which is the most hilarious. I mean, not the most hilarious thing, but it was so cute.
It was
so our little granddaughter, Lena, who is almost 3, 2.5. She was basically had a pad of paper and a pencil and was writing down, like my son-in-law, she was like writing down a list.
Jorge is also hysterical.
Jorge is pretty funny. And so he was like telling her, and she was literally like writing things down, looking at him, asking questions, I'll put in quotes, which didn't, because she can't really talk.
And there was no Google Translate for that.
No, there was not. But the thing is, what I appreciated about this and why we bring it up is because he was just taking her seriously. So when your toddler is trying to communicate with you or trying to do something or play something that's important to them, take that seriously. Yeah. Like, look at that being like, oh, wow, I see you doing this. Oh, I love that. That's amazing. Look, whatever, talk to them in that way. Because I think that sometimes we talk too quickly. We as parents, we're always like, if you are constantly moving place to place and you're constantly giving them directions, here, put on your shoes, here, do this, go, blah, 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 and you don't have time to just go slow. Like my son-in-law was just sitting there. She was like writing, and he was just like giving her his time.
Right.
And how often do we really give our toddlers or our preschoolers our time to just, or are we always on our phones or watching something or getting up to do something? Maybe we just kind of like sit on the floor, read them a book, have that conversations, like basically slow down. So.
And when you think about this, why don't we do that? We don't do that because we have created a schedule that demands us to do this at this time, this at this time. And again, I'm all for a schedule.
Routines.
But we prefer routines. And by routines, that gives what we mean, one, particularly with little guys, right? If there is a parent who can be at home and they can waste time with their kids, this is powerful. This sets the stage for so much for the kids' future, but also it again changes you, because I only get frustrated. The times I most get frustrated with our kids is when I'm trying to accomplish some task and they're the obstacle that I'm trying to overcome.
Well, one thing actually, when you were saying that made me think of is that even when you are doing something like, for example, like making dinner or setting the table, if you have a toddler there, if they can participate in any way, if you can do it slow enough that they won't be in your way and that they can be given something to do. Now, that's not exactly conversation, but it is just kind of to that whole point about slowing down.
Yeah. And with this, we'll probably talk about this at a little later point too, but kids won't always remember what you say. They will remember how they felt.
Right.
And going with the idea that in communicating with the young child, what you say, how you treat them.
That's right.
Do they feel respected? Is there a level of dignity even with their nonsensical stuff, right?
Exactly.
Again, this is true in every stage, but if we get that clear in our head,
right.
What's more important, getting X job done or our child knowing this? Again,
right.
There's a balancing act that we have to play
right.
as parents, but if you can have some carefree wasting time with your kids, it's worth it. It'll
okay, so
pay
I
off.
want to bring up one topic that people ask us about, and this is when kids say why. Kids do why.
Yes.
They sometimes when you're in the car, whatever, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, as soon as they learn how to talk, they start asking why, and we've definitely experienced that with our kids.
And sometimes
too.
my mind wants to explode.
Yeah.
You know.
So one of the reasons that kids do that is because they're trying to have a conversation with you.
Right. They want to be in relationship. They're looking for
recognize, they're learning how that the back and forth goes. The exchange. And so they know if they ask that you'll respond.
Right.
As you should respond.
That's right.
And so they want to kind of practice that. So when your child keeps asking why, your child keeps asking why, recognize that they're trying to have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
And so the content of what they're asking about isn't really that important, but it's really the conversational part.
And I know I mentioned this already, but as you're not dumbing down, if you will, the language, you are trying to get on their level. And sometimes in this age, it means you're physically getting down on their level. I remember as having particularly our daughters who were playing with their dolls. I wanted to get into their world. Yeah. It's not purely about trying to elevate them to come into your world. It's also you entering their world so that they know their world matters. Because as the toddlers, some of the questions that are really important are relevant to their life, their sphere, if you will, that's around them. And early on, that's very close. And again, in conversations, you're building up their identity on some level. So even if they're playing with toys or they're playing games, maybe you should ask questions about what's your favorite toy? Why is that your favorite toy? You like this game. Why do you like this game?
Yeah.
Tell me about the aspects of this game that you really enjoy.
Right.
And because you're helping them, boys and girls, begin to articulate things that matter. And again, we'll talk about this in other podcasts, but when you do that, you communicate that they matter.
Right.
You know, and there's something vital about that.
So, but I just want to real quick just mention about the whole like them asking why. If that is driving you crazy, what I would do is that I would ask them a question. So if they say, we're going to church, why? Well, because we love Jesus and we want to be with him. Why? Well, because da 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 da. Stop. If you don't mind that, then sure, go for it. But I would ask them. Sometimes I would ask my kids, well, why do you think we're going to church? Well, why do you want to go to church? Well, what do you want to do there? Like, ask them a question, because that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to have that conversation. So what you were getting into there are things to talk about. Right. Okay. So these are suggestions of things to talk about. So first of all, like what Mike just said, I bet they can talk about toys and games and, all of that. But one of the things that I would make a suggestion is that the most common thing that parents do is when little kids come home from school, especially preschool, is they say, how was your day? Or what did you do what did you do at school? And kids will go, nothing. I played. For the toddler and preschooler, time is irrelevant. They are very present in wherever they are. Right. So it's very hard for them to reflect back on what happened during their day. So I think it is actually more effective to talk to them about what they are doing right then. Oh, it's so good to see you. Oh, it's wonderful. I hope you had a good day at school, whatever. But I think if nothing else, you could say, well, who did you play with today? Right. And you can ask them those kinds of things. Right. Or what was your favorite thing that you did today? Right. Maybe they can ask that.
And toddlers, if they're going to school or they did, if
preschoolers, I'm thinking, up to 5-year-olds.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if they're in school, they may have a project that they worked on. Mm-hmm. And maybe they have something that, did you work on anything at school that you want to show me today? Or any project, craft or academic or whatever.
But then little kids too, they are very interested in their own bodies. Right? Because they're just kind of forming this sense of self. So if you're in the car with little kids or you're waiting for a line or something, you could always ask them about kids love their body parts, right? Where is your nose? Where is your eyes? Where's your teeth? You know, like from the time that they can start walking, little ones can do all of that.
Right.
You know,
right.
and then even like, can you jump? Can you run? Can you march? You know, wiggle your fingers, like all of that, or wiggle them fast, slow, up, down, you know, all of those kinds of things.
And when I'm in the car with kids, I always like to engage their senses, right? So we look out and say, hey, do you see those trees? Do you see those cows? What noise do the cows make? You know, even again, just simple little things.
Right.
And all of us kind of do this naturally. But in our modern day, we can just quickly turn on music and let that be the end of it.
Right.
And again, we love music. We do listen to music. I even actually encourage our, you know, like when I was driving our little guys to preschool, the grandkids and so forth, I would talk to them and then we'd end up singing a song. Hey, do you guys want to sing a song together? And although that wasn't a formal conversation, there was an exchange, there was a value there. But then it might lead to, hey, what's your favorite song?
Yeah.
Hey, why do you have such, you know, blah, 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 or whatever it might be.
Right.
And then I, particularly at the beginning of a day, I would kind of set them up for a good day by saying, what are you most excited about today?
What do you want to play with when you get to school?
And who's the friend that you can't wait to see at school today, you know?
Right.
Or, you know, what, and it prompts them to start thinking about these things. And again, this is part of the way that we help form them is by helping shape by questions, shaping their heart and their attitude and their perspective on the day.
And again, some parents do this naturally, but if you don't, make sure that you're communicating with your body language, that they are important. So bend down, you know, look them in the eye. Don't be always towering over little ones, you know, because that I don't think really invites a good exchange. But when you're sitting, you know, sit down with them, get down on their level, look at their eyes, you know, talk to them in that way. And you know what? Even when you're in the car or anything, just remember that silence works too. Like sometimes it's really okay.
Which is funny in a conversation about conversations. But.
Exactly. But sometimes it's good to have silence because sometimes those kids are thinking.
Right.
They are thinking and they're thinking of formulating words and how to say words, or they're looking around, they're observing. Children are observing all the time. And so that's, again, we just want to stress that imitation. They're constantly watching you. They're watching your face. They're watching how you talk on your phone. They're watching when you don't look at them if you're on your phone. Like they're watching all of it and they're going to imitate what you do.
That's right.
So that forces us to be more intentional.
Okay, so let's go to the next stage, right? So now we're going to school age kids and
age of reason and up.
And so this is a new plane of development for Montessori. This is age of reason according to the church, as you said, and they're beginning to developmentally look at different things.
Yeah,
and I think that this is a nice.
They're moving out of like their own body and space to relationship with others.
And so what I think is so important in the conversation is that we're instilling a curiosity, that we're cultivating or encouraging curiosity in our kids. And by the conversations we have, again, we do need to impart knowledge because they don't have it. We do need to impart, you know, a bigger worldview, of course, absolutely. But what I think is so fundamental is just beginning them that sense of wonder in your kids so that they can look at the world around them. They can look at their relationships. They can look at their kind of beginning expanse of their circle of influence or their sphere of control or I don't know, or maybe their domain. Maybe, I don't know if that's a right word, right? But
there are things in their life that they have control over.
And so looking at that and really allowing them to be more curious so that they expand. Because as we all did when we were kids, we're taking steps out developmentally. You know, again, it's not as serious until they get to more adolescent steps out in a more independent way. But this is the beginning of them looking at that world, and you want to make sure that those are good experiences, and you're kind of the curiosity lets them take that. I don't say risk is maybe too strong of a word, but in a certain sense, a risk to go out and connect with the world around them. Their relationships and new experiences.
Well, what you're communicating to them too is that the world is knowable. That's you know, if you're wondering about something, it's something frightens you, whether it's earthquakes or tornadoes or hurricanes or whatever. Like the world is knowable. We can know these things. And I'm just thinking about like the natural world, but then there's other things as well. And it's good to talk about them and to share with them, even just like the facts of sciences and all of those kinds of things, but even just about people and where people live and how people talk and why people do things. And you can even ask them, well, why do you think, about certain things, but just recognize that there's so much that kids don't know.
Yes.
There's so much that they don't know. They need to be taught everything.
And we're the ones who are supposed to age appropriately expose them to the goodness, the beauty, the truth that's around them.
And if you develop in them that curiosity, they will keep asking questions and they'll be learning their whole life.
Because again, and I feel like we're repeating in some ways what I did in a previous podcast. What was that podcast on? Like kind of on discipline and formation. That they matter. Anyway, but that through this time, you want to teach them that.
That wasn't a podcast. That was a talk that we did.
Oh,
our actions matter, so they matter.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
We talk too much. We're like forgetting where we said certain things. That's right. So you didn't say that before.
All right. So
on the podcast anyway.
I'll just say it here. So when you communicate to your kids in a disciplined and informative way, that maybe you're correcting their behavior or what have you, you're saying your actions matter, therefore you matter, right? That's a vital element when we talk about discipline. But when you are creating curiosity in a child, they're beginning to ask questions about the world around them, and you don't want to shut that down. You want to.
That's the worst thing you could do.
You want to be able to, again, still form them. Don't let them go down the wrong path or anything like that. But you want to, by questions, keep their curiosity alive, keep their wonder alive, so that when they say something that maybe is just plain wrong, or may even be shocking to you, something that may be against the faith, because they're like, oh, well, I hate going to mass. I don't know if a little guy is going to say that, but maybe because
that 11-year-old would say that.
Yeah, 11-year-old would for sure. But don't automatically respond to, well, you have to go to mass. Again, they do have to go to mass.
Or that's a mortal sin.
Yeah, or like you're cutting it off as opposed to having a conversation. Now, again,
what would you say?
If they're and just to put the scenario right, so I'm not saying, hey, then your kid can stay at home because of this. That's not what I'm talking about.
We're talking about conversations.
We're talking about conversations, right? And so if a child said,
I don't want to go to mass.
I don't want to go to mass. Mass is boring. And say, well, tell me why you think that's boring. And say, because then you want to, because one, as a parent, you have to be curious. You have to look at it.
So what if I say, if I'm 11 years old and I say, I don't know, it just is.
It just is. Okay. It's like, all right, well, for me, when I was a kid, I often found that it was boring because I didn't understand what was going on. Or I was getting anxious because I was thinking about all the things that I wanted to do. But then I began understanding, and I started to look for, why do we go to mass? What's happening at the mass?
Right.
What's really going on? And I started being curious about what things the priest was doing. What am I supposed to do?
And then you could even ask, do you have questions? Like, do you understand why this is happening or that's happening or whatever?
And then we can even ask things like, do you understand what's happening at mass?
Right.
Can you explain to me in your own words what's happening at mass? And because then it might be like, well, okay, so that's interesting. Well, what about this? And
sometimes they do know, but they have to it has to be solidified. They know in like a tertiary way.
That's right.
But for them to say it, then maybe even, because this happens to all of us, when we say it out loud, we're like, wow, that is really cool. I never thought about it that way, And it happens to children too.
It'll challenge us, like, again, using the mass as a topic, but it could be any topic, right?
Yes.
Where it's like, we do need to be ahead of our kids. To know something just for your own sake is maybe at this level of knowledge or in insight and inspiration, right? But if you want to actually teach someone else, you really need to have a higher level of insight. That doesn't mean you give them your high level knowledge, but you age appropriately, respond to the needs that they have. And so if those things that are coming up, probe into them, see what's at the heart, and then respond to that. Give them food when you've earned the respect, if you will. That doesn't, again, if your kids are using that as somehow an excuse not to go to church, no, that's not an option. You're the parent. You know what's best for your child. That's not what we're talking about here.
They don't get to make that choice.
And I think that this often comes in when you have these two Again, I'm just going to kind of talk about discipline for just a quick second, right? Because it's all about formation. There's the permissive parenting, and then there's the authoritarian parenting. The permissive parenting is kind of like, child, whatever you think is right.
And it's almost too much conversation in a way.
And you just go, wherever it goes, that's fine. And then there's the authoritarian that will just seek to control and stop conversation and really without reason.
Squash it.
Direct the child and try to control them. Where what we're proposing, particularly in the realm of conversation, is for you to be able to say, hey, I understand that it's boring to you, but I need you to explain to me why. I want to hear from you why that's boring. Okay, great. And how about your understanding on this? And diving deeper and says, well, did you realize that this was blank, blank, blank? And have a bigger, fuller explanation.
And that kind of goes back to what we were saying before, that children won't always remember what you say, that they will remember how they felt. And so even if they just remember for the rest of their life, I remember having a conversation with my dad about the Mass.
Right.
And he made me feel so valued.
That's
he made me feel like this was really important. I don't remember exactly what he said, but I remember that was a good conversation.
Yeah.
I felt good talking to my dad or my mom about these spiritual things. I really felt seen and heard and known, and that as opposed to, I just remember being shut down. I remember feeling stupid.
Yes.
I remember feeling like I was a bad kid for even saying that.
I was wrong.
Oh my gosh. It sounds simple. Feeling is going to be associated with all of the things in regards to the faith. And you just don't want that.
And again, busy, frantic parents don't have time for conversation. Don't be a busy and frantic parent.
Right.
Make a decision, recognizing you still need to get to places, you still need to get things done. So there isn't always time for this elaborate conversation. But if you changed your attitude, and again, thinking of like any of these conversations that come up, well, why do I have to go to school? We're not going to have a big conversation right now about that. But you know what? When we come over to school, let's have a bigger talk.
Yeah.
That's always fine to be able to say, hey, we're going to put a pin in this conversation for right now, and we're going to come back to it. And remember to come back to it.
And I think that that's a way too, that kind of going back to also family culture, and just that if that openness and that helping people feel seen and valued, that should be part of your family culture. And conversations within the family is one of the ways to foster that. Okay, so things to talk about with elementary age kids. I think that most of them start getting involved in sports and outside activities and all of that. And so you can always ask about like, hey, what was the best part of practice? What did you have your coach do? What was the hardest thing that you did? Asking about their friends. Who's your best friend? Why are they your best friend? Who did you sit with at lunch today? I was talking with Claire about that yesterday. Who do you sit with? Why do you sit with them?
And I as a dad, I think I've shared this before on the podcast, but I do have a not a great memory. I actually had a little notebook, and I really probably should go look for that again. But for a couple years, I would have my special time with the kids, and I would just ask them questions, and I'd write down, who's your best friend right now? What is the favorite game that you like to play? What sport makes you feel most alive? Or whatever it might be. What's the most challenging part of school? What's the most enjoyable part of school? But all those things to really just kind of engage them again in that wider world that are part of. And something that we typically start maybe a little bit before this, but I think probably school age is when we start the highs and lows.
Yeah,
and we
definitely.
do that usually at dinner time. And it was usually a group conversation. But again, it was highs and lows. There's
happy and crappy.
I was thinking that. But going around to each child so that they have a chance, that they know that they can be heard, that they can be seen, that there's a value in them and their input. But it's also for each of the children to get into kind of a comfort of speaking in front of others, speaking in front of their family, sharing something that's going on in their lives. There's an intimacy that is... It's not massive, but it's enough, particularly when there's something tough that will happen that day.
When you speak, it is good. People will listen to you.
That's right.
It sends that message. Here you are in a group of 5 people, and you're speaking and everyone is listening. Even if you have little ones.
Yep.
I would even say to my little ones, hey,
and it's
Jimmy's speaking right now.
And it's showing that child who's speaking that they are valued, but it also is training everyone else that it's appropriate to listen, and the spotlight is not always on them.
Right, exactly.
All right, so those are some of the questions.
So now Teenagers. Dun, dun, dun. All right.
All right. So first, teens. There is a phenomenon today that there is more peer influence on teens today than ever in the all time throughout all of history. There's more peer influence than ever before, and that isn't a good thing.
Because before, teens were always
not that all teens are bad and evil.
Right. But, no, but before, all teens were with adults.
That's right.
Teens were part of the community of adults. Yes, they were in school, but when they were at home, they were with their parents. They were sometimes working. They had jobs. They were
coaches,
influenced by other adults. But now with the advent of social media and just with so many organized sports and things like that, the teens are with other teens all the time,
without an adult to say, hey, that's not. And again, we're not talking about helicopter, parenting or swooping in.
I'm talking about a teen one-on-one talking to an adult who is maybe not their neighbor, a boss, another family member. Most teens don't live near grandma, grandpas, aunts, uncles, older cousins. That
was an influential part of the life of a teenager, which raised them up from immaturity to maturity, right? Because this is the key moment. Once you're a teenager, you're no longer thinking about being an adult. You're practicing. Teen years is about practicing to be an adult before you're an adult, right?
And a lot of times for those teens, the only one-on-one relationship with any adult in their life is their parent,
right?
Because if they're part of the herd at school, right? They are one student in a whole room of students.
That's right.
On the sports field. They are one student among a whole bunch. Very rarely now, except, with exceptional teachers,
That's
exceptional coaches. But for the most part, the average teenager, the only adults they're ever talking with is their parent. Yeah. And so that kind of makes it even more important. Now, the best thing is that you have other adults in the lives of your children, but just to recognize that your conversations with your child are really important.
And I felt like, and I think this is true for dads in general, I feel like that moms and dads are always essential in the lives of their kids. I don't mean to dismiss the dad's role with younger children, but I believe in the teen years, there is something vital about a dad having some deeper conversations with their kids.
Right.
There is still this image, regardless of who works in the home or who stays at home or any of this, the family dynamics that are at present in your home, there is an aspect that dad represents the outside world. There's also this this clear sense that as dads, we are challenged, we are called, we are required, I believe, to take our great power and lay it at the service of our family. And there's something ennobling for the man in that sacrifice. But when you can lower yourself in an appropriate way to raise your child up, there is something.
Well, it's kind of like bending down to their level.
Yeah. So you're not doing it to
it's kind of like crouching down to look at the child in the eye.
Yeah, like when we talked earlier, like I remember literally bending down to play with toys with my young daughters or sons, right? But then there was also a natural coming down to a teens and getting into their world to see things from their vantage point, which questions and conversations allow you to see the world from their vantage point.
Yeah.
And even something as simple as because each new plane of development, you in a way have to earn trust, have to build and strengthen the relationship for the next test, the next trial, the next stage of development. And when you enter into that teen years, one of the beautiful things that you can do is, or at least that I did, is even asking, my daughters to make playlists of the music they're listening to. Yeah. Or when I talk to my sons and I say, hey, can you play me some stuff? And they've all made me playlists because I want to know them.
Right.
And so as a teen,
you want to know what's important to
them. As a dad, and this is true, I guess, for moms obviously as well, but I want them to know that their life is important to me.
Yeah.
And you need to make sure you're doubling down on that. And again, we've talked about it so many times that we won't go into it right now, but that pre-adolescent time when you're still actually pretty gold in their eyes, it helps set the stage for how you communicate in the teen years,
right?
Which we talk quite a bit about. But as a dad, I think there's some conversations that we can have and need to have, but it all begins with establishing a new level of trust.
Yeah.
Because I won't believe, what does the phrase go? I won't believe in what you say if I don't believe that you love me. That there's this deep sense that I need to trust you. Your child is saying, I need to trust you and be able to confide in you, and that you are not, you may have ideas that are bigger than mine, but that you know me and trust me, or that I know and trust you, rather, and that I felt known and seen by you.
Right. And I think that that's part of parents too, having integrity in their own lives, because that if those teenagers see you saying one thing to them, but living another way, you don't have integrity.
Kids are great BS detectors. We've said this before. We really believe they can say, this is BS. You're not being honest with me.
You're trying to you tell them to always, be polite and speak with kindness, but then they see you yelling at people, when you are driving, like you're yelling at other drivers, or that you treat a waiter or waitress disrespectfully. And that kind of goes down to even how you talk to your spouse.
Absolutely.
I mean, they are watching that. And guess what? However you talk to your spouse, they're going to start imitating that. Yes. They're gonna pick up on that, because they're like, okay, this is what we're allowed to do here.
This is how we do this. This is what we can converse as an adult. And again, they intuitively know we are practicing to be adults right now. Yeah. And they're oftentimes maybe in the early days they're not early teens, but they're going to be soon pushing those boundaries, pushing those limits, because they know that they want to be an adult. They want to drive. They want to have power, autonomy, freedom, blah blah blah, all those things, and that will come out. And as we talked about before, don't take it as a disrespect or be shocked by X, Y, or Z in their actions or in their words. Use that as an opportunity to go deeper. Every moment is an occasion is a teaching moment, a formative moment, a moment to have a good and meaningful, crucial conversation.
And I think if you overhear them, talking about things or listening to things or engaging with things that you don't like, I think it's important that you talk to them about it, and that you say, tell me more. Why are you listening to this guy? What about this is so interesting to you? Hey, make me a playlist or whatever. But I had a conversation with one of my sons. I was like, I want you to print out the lyrics to, 10 of your favorite songs, and let's talk about them. And
you were surprised with some of the goodness.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it's having that humility and also saying, hey, look, if this is important to you, you've tried to stake your claim, if you will, and say, okay, I'm going to do this. This is the kind of person I'm going to be. And if a child says that when they're 14 or 15 years old, a lot of times they don't get it right the first time. We have seen this with our kids. Sometimes they'll say, I like this kind of music. And then a couple years later, they're like, no, I don't like that. I like this.
Yeah. And there's a developmental growth or maturity or preference changes.
Yes. They're just figuring things out. And so if you condemn them or say why are you doing this? This is total crap. Blah, 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 blah. Then it stifles them to try to figure out who they are. And it, more importantly, I really think it hurts your relationship with them.
That's right.
Because it doesn't help them feel valued.
Because it is essential that you recognize that conversations are a effective tool for building relationships.
Right.
As well as formative. Because again, this it's hard not to talk about some of the principles of discipline and formation, right?
Yeah.
Rules without relationship breed rebellion. It is essential that as a mom and a dad, you get that principle burned into your mind, especially for preteen and teen years. Rules without relationship breed rebellion, meaning you need to have a platform upon which your rules stand. Yeah. Don't have rules in isolation. Yeah. They need to be merged together, because you want them to know love and truth are not two distinct elements. They are birthed together. They need to be bringing life to your child.
So there's that whole formation aspect, but then there's a discipline and all of that. But then there's even parts of conversation where you're just teaching them how to engage socially with the world, even Jordan Peterson talks about not allowing your children to do anything that you personally find annoying, and I think for example, if you find it annoying that your child comes over and it's kind of hanging on you, then it's okay for you to say you know what? Don't do that. That's annoying to me. Can you not do that? Or if your child has a funny tick, or if your child doesn't brush their hair. Some parents are like, I don't really care. That doesn't bother me. Well, fine, but recognize that if you are also training them socially. Okay.
Right.
So you're getting them ready to go out into the world and to relate with other people. And so if they're doing things to you, that you find annoying and you don't correct it, they're going to go out and they're going to do those to other people. And those other people are going to reject them, treat them unkindly, or just being like, you're a weirdo. It's like teaching your children social skills. That's what you do in the home. Maybe it's by modeling them. Maybe it's by, could you not do that right now? Because that's making me uncomfortable, or I don't like it when you do that. Can you do this instead? Teaching them. But of course, recognizing that, you don't want to hurt their feelings.
Not only do you want to hurt their feelings, they are unique individuals who may value things or have things in a different light than you do.
But the thing is that I'm telling you right now, people out in the world, other friends, especially teenagers,
yes,
they are not going to care about hurting your kid's feelings.
Yes.
They 100% will not care about hurting their feelings. So if you don't tell your kid, you know what you're wearing right now, like can we go out shopping or can we do something else, or talking about those kinds of things, because if they are not, if they don't have that social awareness, that is something that you as a parent, you do have to develop that in them.
Well, and I think what you're getting to is communicating values, because every family, we talk about this, that every family has unique values. There are some standard values, meaning your child needs to be modest. I believe your child needs to extol a beauty, like meaning that the styles that they choose. And I know you go through this in the Women Wonderfully Made. They talk about that there is something very appropriate at the way that we use clothes, that sort of thing. But there's also things that are just unique to you as a family. And it's okay to be able to say, hey, at our family, we really have elevated conversations. Intellectual conversations. Well, we as a family, we really talk about sports a lot, or what, and maybe that's value. Okay, awesome. And one of the ways you effectively pass on your values is the conversations you have.
Right.
And I think as you get into the teen years, that you need to begin planting the seeds for their life in the future, what they want for their lives. Now, no teenager 18 or under is ready to make life decisions. But when they're early on, again, just to grab real quickly from the what we talk about with formation and discipline, is you're moving the locus of control when they're young. It's an external locus of control.
Right.
You're controlling their environment. You're controlling a lot of their behavior, but you're moving as in pre-adolescent, age of reason, all the way through. You're beginning to move that locus of control, so it's internal. So your child is the master of their own destiny, because you've built up a strength, a discipline, and they understand that discipline equals freedom. And so there's some great conversations in the teen years, because they want to talk about growing up. They want to talk about being an adult. And so I remember having some of the funnest conversations. Well, let's talk about you after you've graduated college. Forget about what you're going to study in college. What do you want?
What do you want to do 10 years from now?
Yeah. What do you want?
Not 5 years from now.
and what do those relationships look like? Who are the people? When you're married, what's the kind of spouse that you want to be married to? All right, well, then that's the kind of spouse. All right, well, then what kind of person do you need to be
to attract that kind of spouse?
Or what things would you like to spend your time on? Just thinking about what you know today. Don't worry. And those conversations, getting them to dream and getting them to think about their future, because then they can say, I'm going to make some small decisions today that are going to help me move toward that, because your conversations and your formation are leading them towards a greater good, something outside of themselves in those conversations.
And I think that this is why the formation that you give them in the pre-teen years is so important. And I would say even in the early teens, like 14, 15, because as they get older and when they question things, I think it's really important that we resist the urge to preach to kids, especially when they're 16, 17, 18, but instead, you should be, you're still forming them. Right. And this is why the conversations before they get to that age are so important. But I think at that point, you need to be really asking them to think more deeply about certain things.
Yeah.
And you need to,
building
and
it
if
up.
they, Yes, exactly. But if
because you want to create steps or put rungs in the ladder for them, right?
Right. But if you're like preaching and like droning on and on and on to them, they will just, all they will hear is wah, 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 you know. But if they're engaged and you ask them about themselves, teenagers love talking about themselves. They really do.
There's a developmental place where they're quote unquote selfish, but they're doing it out of a good developmental stage.
They have to form themselves. Now, maybe initially, you know, it's harder to get through that. But to ask them about why do they think the way they do and all of that. And you may be surprised about the thoughtfulness that they have, even if they are misguided.
Yes.
I think that still asking them about that and just to kind of like, this is your time to build on things that they already know. This is the time to build on them and ask questions to find out their motivation. Why are you questioning about mass? Why are you questioning about what, you know, the role of men and women are, or the role of whatever, you know, those bigger questions, like talk this question and point them to other resources, you know, and
because
I think
this is
that's
when you
important.
Want them to start taking on the ability to go and find the answers and seek out.
Or even say, hey, I want to challenge you. Here, go watch this video and then come back to me and I want to talk about this more with you, because this is really important that you understand that what you're watching on TikTok or what you saw, that video that you saw on Instagram.
Hopefully your kids are not on TikTok.
But a lot of kids, that's where they get their information.
You're totally right.
They get a lot of news online. And so, but the thing is, and this is what parents have to be so careful about, is that the algorithm will keep bringing up videos and news clips and things about stuff that they've already looked at. So they will get sectioned into this one political philosophy or worldview without you even knowing it. So that's why you as a parent have to make sure that you're pointing out other things, that you say, oh, hey, watch this Dennis Prager video. Oh, here, maybe Ben Shapiro had this really interesting conversation. Or, hey, I saw this interview that Joe Rogan did with so-and-so, you know, or Jordan Peterson or whatever. You know, you can pick and choose those things that you want to point them in a new direction, but you're never going to find that out if you don't. And also, because this is the thing too, is that kids at those older teenage years, they need other people than you.
That's right.
They won't always, you've had a lot of time to talk to them and give them information. They need to have what you say being backed up by other people.
Yes.
You know, and the interesting thing about somebody like a Joe Rogan, for example, is that sure, there's some people he interviews that I would definitely disagree with, but there's other people he interviews that are really, really interesting and that would agree with things. And so you can always point out,
this
and that's why
older teens, really.
Older teens, you can point out other sources of information for them that they may not find on their own by just going through their own Instagram, Facebook, TikTok feed.
And just to that point, again, I think we've talked about this before, but in days gone by, families would watch the news together, and there was basically one source of news.
That's right.
And
I remember watching the news with my dad and asking him questions.
There would be questions asked by the children, the parents explaining, understanding.
Yeah.
They had the same thing. I remember that there was a study, and I can't remember what it was, but the fracturing of America happened. And again, there's a beauty of the internet. There's a beauty of a multitude of sources for news and information. But there's also a lot of fake stuff out there. And just this past weekend, or maybe a week or so ago, sitting down talking with Mikey and a bunch of his friends. And they said, well, you know, how NASA, and our son wasn't saying it, but one of his friends was, well, how NASA started as a space or a underwater exploration. I'm like, time out, what? And it's a huge trending story. Totally fake, fabricated history that NASA started under the sea and then for some reason switched to outer space. And I'm like, incorrect. 1956. Look up the facts. But the kids were like, what? And I'm like, yes. Yeah. And so we need to know what our kids, what they're processing. Right. And so do not take for granted that your kids are only hearing stuff that you allow in your home. Even if your kids don't have social media, their friends do.
Right.
And even if your kids are smart, they are swimming in a sea of kids that are being dragged along by some trending stories that are out
because
there.
At school, some kid is going to be like, oh, did you know that NASA started as an underwater exploration? Oh, really? I didn't know that. And then the other kid is going to explain it like they know what they're talking about. So your kid's not on social media or whatever. But guess what? they're talking to other kids, and they really do want to learn about the outside world.
And I could have just said, oh, that's wrong. And I said, well, where did you see that?
Exactly.
And I said, well, I can tell you for sure NASA was started as a space. I mean, it was a simple thing, right? But that goes to the point of how much about our faith or morality or the things that we deeply care about is being misconstrued, misunderstood, and being absorbed in by our children, which are often some sponges that just take up what's in the air that they breathe, what's being communicated to them. So we need to make sure that we never forget that as parents, we are the greatest influence in their lives. We're the most important social relationship in the lives of our kids.
Yeah.
And we have an obligation, responsibility, and an honor to have these conversations to help form our kids.
Absolutely. All right, let's do some key takeaways. I think we've given you guys enough things to think about. All right. First of all, conversations form your children, but more importantly, these conversations form you, right? Kids will not always remember what you said. They will remember how they felt.
Yes.
Okay. And then also remember, and as we've gone through this, I think this has kind of come out, the conversations need to be different depending on the different ages and stages of development of your child. And the last thing is simply make conversations part of your family culture, right? How that conversations happen, like when do they happen, and what it is that you talk about. Yeah.
And when we have, should I do the couple questions or we just tell them? Okay. So here's a couple questions for you as a couple to discuss, right? Just on a scale of 1 to 10, how good are we talking with our kids? Where are we at right now? Just evaluate yourself. Just kind of take a pulse check. Are we good at having conversations with our kids or not? How can we improve, right? What is the most difficult part of talking with our kids? Think of your kids, the ages that they're at, the conversations that you want to have or should be having. What's challenging and most difficult about that? And how can we get over it? Because together, I think you can come up with some ideas. What assumptions do I make when I'm talking with my children? Because again, when we hear things, what are we taking in? How are we processing that? What are the assumptions we're making? And then finally, what are some topics my children would like to talk about?
So I got to brainstorm with your spouse of like, what are some good things to talk about with this child?
That will have twofold. I'll maybe rephrase it. That they will like, that will be engaging to them, and be formative for you, right? Because this is all about you stepping more fully into your role as a parent. So what's going to engage them that they're going to like, but also you find is going to lead to forming their hearts and orient them towards the good, the true, and the beautiful.
Well, you know what? I kind of thought this would be a shorter podcast, but I guess I was wrong.
Hey, this was great. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. We'd love to hear from you. We love hearing emails that we get, questions and so forth. And if you like the topic here, please make sure you share it with some others.
Yeah. Do you want to pray?
Let's pray. Let's pray.
Go ahead. You go.
All right. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Oh, dear Father, right now, I just pray that you can allow all of us, all the parents listening, you can allow our hearts to be more open to conversations with you, to deepen our intimacy, to deepen our conversations with you and your Holy Spirit, and enlighten our minds as couples. How can we more effectively parent our kids? How can we engage more effectively in conversations, crucial conversations that matter? Any fears, any doubts, any concerns we have, Lord, we want you to remove those and make it easy, make it possible and accessible for us to learn how to be more effective in our conversations. In your name we pray. Amen. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.